Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I am Catherine Weand. I am the supervisor for social worker initial training and also over our internship coordinator position, which is currently vacant. A lot of you guys may have, I believe, met Kenya, and she went to go do something else. And so Mary Beth Hadaway, our former intern coordinator and also a senior in my unit, have been holding down the intern fort. So when we get to, questions and how to contact us, I'll talk a little bit more about using that email, just because both of us are trying to check it. And right now they're not filling our internship coordinator position. So we are just juggling a bunch of things and appreciate your understanding and patience. So once you guys get hired, because you're all going to get hired, you will come through training with me. And so I'll talk a little bit about what happens after that as well. But the reason that we do this is we want to make sure that all of the wonderful experiences that you guys are both bringing to school and internship and also having while you're in internship translate onto your application. The way county applications work is very specific. And so we want to make sure that we give you all the tips and tricks to have a really good application so that when they're reviewing it, you're getting that weighted score that's going to get you in the door. So just a little bit about the process with the county. So it is a government organization, so everything is very, very standardized. And so just you will see the recruitment come out at some point. We are always in close touch with our HR department and also with the schools to make sure that you guys get the heads up first and foremost when that recruitment opens. I believe that our admin analyst even emails the schools to let them know when the recruitment is opening. So as soon as that recruitment opens up, you guys will go in and create your application. We'll talk a little bit about even creating an account before that happens to make it a little bit easier once you get to the application. You'll complete your online application, send it off. You will get a score. You'll probably get an email that says something about you were successful in the application process. And your score is whatever it is. So part of our job today is to make sure that you are really kind of letting the county know all of the experience that you have. And so all the boxes that can possibly be checked get checked, because all of those boxes are weighted. And so we want to help you get the best score possible. Once they collect all the applications, the recruitment closes, all the applications are scored, they figure out what their pool is. They will schedule what we call a hiring hall. It usually happens on a Saturday, or pretty much always happens on a Saturday. They are still being done somewhat virtually. The interviewers will be in a room together, but you guys will be virtual unless something changes between now and when the recruitment opens, which I don't anticipate will happen. You will have 2 people interviewing you. Everybody will be on Teams. The way they are doing it now is they are allowing you to review the questions before the interview actually starts, which is great. So it's kind of a panel interview. You'll have a chance to review the questions, and then the interviewers will ask you the very standardized questions, and you'll have 30 minutes for the entire interview. At the end, you'll have a chance to ask the interviewers some questions, and you will probably not, well, you definitely won't find out whether or not you passed that day. One of the things we're still working out with HR, but has historically happened, is that usually the people who pass don't really hear anything. It's the people who don't pass that get a phone call. So I always say no news is good news, but you're always welcome to reach out to HR and follow up and stuff like that. So once you pass the interview, HR will depending on when we have a class starting and when we've worked hard with HR to align our hire dates with the recruitments. The way it works right now is the date you are hired, you will actually go into the field for 3 weeks into a unit that is a workforce training and development unit strictly for the purpose of shadowing. So you won't start training right away. You'll come to us about 3 weeks later. So in order to align with those hire dates, they will select the first, and this is why the rating on your application is often important, because into determining who's going to be in that first class after a recruitment, they will look at scores. Okay, so they pick maybe the top 30, we can have 30 people in a class, so they may offer the position to maybe a couple more than 30, or they might start with 30, and if somebody immediately turns it down, they'll offer it to the next person and say that you're eligible, and they'll start you in the process of a background check. Obviously you'll be working with families and children, so it's a fairly extensive background check, similar to what you went through as an intern, but you will have to do it again when you're hired. Okay, so it's one of the reasons that when we offer Title IV stipends, that we do that background check initially, so that we make sure that we're not going to have any problems on the back end when you guys come to get a job. Once you clear the background check, you will be contacted by HR to go get a medical exam. They do like vision, hearing, like can you bend down and pick up a box? I don't know exactly what it pertains to anymore, but there is a medical component. It's really important that when HR says to go do something that you follow up. There's a drug test, there's a TB test. That's one thing that often delays people. And we have had people that are supposed to be in, for instance, a December 31st hire date, and they don't follow through on that stuff in a timely manner, and so they get pushed to a later class, and it could mean the difference in like 4 months of you not being able to get a paycheck from the county. So it's really important that when you're asked to go do those things, that you get the background paperwork turned in a timely manner, and that you go schedule those medical tests timely.
Catherine, this is probably a good place to point out that if you're a BSW, this usually initial application that comes out in December, January, you will not qualify for because you haven't completed your bachelor's degree. So usually the next recruitment that comes out, you'll be able to apply on. So if you have already a bachelor's degree and you're graduating with your MSW, this recruitment that will come out in the winter, you'll be eligible to apply. And there was one other question about approximately how long do they get the interview questions prior to the interview. And I said in the past, it was 15 to 30 minutes. I don't know, online, there could be some timing changes, right? As far as how long people have to review.
Yeah, so actually since we've been virtual, they haven't allowed people to see the questions ahead of time. They just recently started doing that. And I talked to them about the last hiring hall, which was last Saturday. And what they're doing is the interviewers are welcoming the person, saying, hi, thanks for doing this interview. We're going to turn off our cameras. We're going to put the questions up on the screen for you, and you'll have 15 minutes to review them. So they've tried to create it so all 5 questions, it's actually 4 questions in a writing sample, but we'll talk about that a little bit later, like show up on the same screen, but you can say like, hey, can you move that up? I can't see a question. So they'll still be there with you. They'll just have their cameras off, and you'll have 15 minutes. And that does not count towards your 30-minute interview.
And then let's clarify a couple of questions. So as an MSW student, you do start the application process. It's usually about 6 months before you graduate, depending upon when the recruitment opens. It is a long process, but this is the recruitment that will open up usually for students to start in June or July. This is the one you would want to apply on. There'll be other recruitments that will open later in the spring usually, and those will capture the BSWs. And also for some reason, if you weren't able to, or you didn't apply, there'll be another opportunity, but those classes may not start until later summer or early fall. And Catherine, you can correct me. And then so the recruitments are not once a year, but they vary. Each year they're a little bit different, depending upon the needs of the county, how often they can offer classes. But usually it's about 4 recruitments. Is that?
Yeah, it sounds like because they've upped the kind of intensity a little bit in hiring. And so we're actually expecting it to be about every 3 months. And so you're correct. So the MSWs will apply in our winter recruitment, which usually opens up in December-ish. And then I expect that there will probably be maybe even a March recruitment. And so for the BSWs, I actually talked with Helen Moody, who does a lot of the work with HR, and we'll probably recommend that the BSWs, well, we will, but they apply with that March recruitment, and we might have to do a letter or something to, depending on when those March people are expected to start. So stay tuned on that, BSWs, because we want to make sure that when you do apply that you qualify. And what has also happened too, you're probably thinking, well, if I apply in December, I don't get out of school until May. I'm not necessarily going to be ready to start. Even when they're every 6 months, there will be an April class, and we might actually have 2 April classes. They'll just defer you until the July class. So we recognize that that'll actually start kind of in the middle of June. So we expect that the Title IV people, MSWs, are going to apply early, and we work closely with HR to understand that it's not that all 30 of these people just don't want a job right now, that they actually have to finish school. So there's a lot of communication that's able to happen.
Mm-hmm. And you can,
we will make sure you get in for sure.
Work with your, either with me at Cal State San Marcos or Amalia at San Diego State to coordinate, and we both can help out with clarification about when to apply. But we don't always know. Sometimes the winter application comes out right around finals. Sometimes it comes out after the holidays. So it's just good to be, what we ask is for students to really get prepared and make sure your resume's up to date and that you're ready to go. One year there was like a weird, December 31st deadline. And those just sometimes make it really compressed and people applying for the time to get everything in. As far as if you, for some reason, didn't get hired on the first round, usually that's a lot having to do with people not submitting all the proper documentation. It's not usually about not passing an interview. So those are things that can hold up people's application because they didn't get things done timely. It's very similar to what Catherine was talking about with your TB test and your medical. Those types of things delay you, and then you won't be able to move forward in that recruitment period.
So I see a question about if with the winter recruitment, when will the start date be? So like I said, with our winter recruitment, it'll actually, after backgrounds and all of that stuff, we'll actually probably be hiring some people from that winter recruitment into our spring classes. You guys obviously can't start school or can't start working when you're still in school. And so the first hire date of what we call the summer classes will likely be June 17th. So that will likely be the date that the MSWs will start. The BSWs, depending on kind of how many recruitments they do and how we're able to work with HR, I anticipate we might have 2 July or 2 summer classes, which would have another hire date of July 1st, but it is possible for the BSWs because of requirements of qualification and stuff like that, that you guys would be more likely to start in a September 9th start date. And those are kind of tentative dates.
I did want to chime in that our hope and our is that you get hired for the one that starts right after school or in June, because if you wait till October, then it gets a little bit tricky. So that's our hope and expectation, is that you would get into the hiring hall and start about a month after graduation.
Now, Amalia, is that for the MSWs or are you hoping that for the BSWs as
Oh,
well?
no, I'm sorry, MSWs. You
Okay.
are correct with the timeline for the bachelor level.
Okay,
They'll do the spring application, and then we'll write a letter for them to
Okay.
be ready to go in October.
perfect. Yeah, and the hire dates are a little bit earlier now since we're doing that 3 week um, ahead of SWIT, because we kept our same SWIT start dates and we just moved up the hiring dates. So, another thing to consider also, I guess this is a good place to say this, is that because you are anticipated to be in those June classes, the background check and the medical probably won't start happening for you until they start to get ready for those summer classes. So we always encourage you guys to be mindful of the fact, if you're planning on vacations and stuff like that, that there could be some, requests for you to go get a medical exam and stuff like that. So again, that's where communication is very, very important, because we want to make sure that we can get you guys through all of that stuff and able to start with that class. It doesn't mean that you can't take a vacation. It just means that the more communication we have, the better.
So we can do that. We can just communicate if we need to do that medical stuff beforehand, like before graduation, or?
Well, it'll all depend. I mean, it'll all kind of depend on the timeline for HR, but hopefully, you're not going on vacation from the time you graduate to the time that SWIT starts. And we can find something will work out that we can get you.
And last year, the students who started in June, most of the stuff was done before they finished graduation.
Okay.
And then if they had a planned vacation, then they let HR know and they worked around that process. So once again, if you can communicate with the HR analyst and let them know, but a lot of people had stuff taken care of in May before people were all finished.
Yeah, the good thing is that because you are Title 4E, you do get priority, and they do know, HR does know that, the up to the point that it needs to, that the 4E students are going to fill that July class. So it's not a matter of who, it's just a matter of like, okay, let's get them the paperwork and stuff. There was a weird thing that happened where a lot of the 4Es were offered the April class, and they had to kind of tell HR like, nope, that's not going to work for me. So, again, we try to help navigate that kind of stuff as well. Any other questions about any of kind of the process? All right. So just a couple of data points around kind of where we're at with PSW right now. Everybody, regardless of education, experience, et cetera, comes in at the same step. Everybody comes in at step 1. It's the entry level step. Currently, the salary is $58,448. We get paid bi-weekly, so you get 26 paychecks a year. So it's fun when 3 paychecks happen in a month because you don't get your health insurance and all that stuff taken out. So it's a little bonus paycheck. For having an MSW, you do get $50 per pay period. That does go into your paycheck before taxes come out. I know that was a question last year, so I'll just go ahead and address it before it becomes a question. Mileage is also taxed, just as an FYI. If you are bilingual, you will get a bilingual premium after training. The bilingual premium does not, you do have to pass a test, both verbal and written. But the bilingual premium does not start until you're actually carrying cases. So the rate you receive is based on the amount that you're using that bilingual. I heard a question from last year about if somebody's multilingual. And again, anything beyond Spanish really comes down to what region you're in and if the manager in that region feels that there's enough of a need for that language that you would be using it a certain amount of time in order to get that bilingual premium. So it is based off the percentage of time that you're actually speaking that other language. So there's some variables involved in the bilingual premium, but if you're Spanish speaking, you can pretty safely count on the fact that once you start getting cases and stuff and you've passed the bilingual exam, that you will be receiving some sort of bilingual premium. There have been people who say, yeah, I am fluent, but I don't want to get the bilingual premium because I don't want to go to a bilingual unit and have to, be one of the few people that speak Spanish and gets those cases. So that does happen. I don't know. I've seen that happen. So you can turn it down, but most people appreciate that extra. And I think that it's also, for the people who have the ability to communicate in other languages, I think it's also a benefit to our families that we serve, that they have somebody that is working with them that is speaking their language. And so that's just my plug.
Catherine, can I
yeah.
interrupt real quick?
Sure.
I'm going to put in the chat a link to a document on childwelfare.gov. It's child welfare terms, English to Spanish. If anybody, is bilingual and plans on taking the test, I'm going to put the link to that document in the chat.
And Melissa, I'm about to answer your question on the next slide, so hold that thought. And so, sorry, I keep putting the chat in front of my slide. So as I mentioned, your training with some exceptions to people who go to a region, like a unique program, which doesn't happen very often, but the total amount of your training will be generally 26 weeks. That may fluctuate for people, but depending on experience, but you can expect to be in training of some sort for 26 weeks. The way that is currently structured is that you have 3 weeks in a region, which is not necessarily where you're going to go. If you are interning, it will likely not be where you did your internship, because we want you to have an opportunity to see a different intern, like a different region. If you live in Temecula or something, we'll probably still try to put you in a northern region or something like that. But so you'll do 3 weeks of just shadowing. You will not carry any cases. You might do some contacts. You will start to get some of that foundational training that's offered in the workforce training and development units. But primarily you will just be shadowing other workers, going out, doing investigations, possibly writing court reports and stuff like that. So once you're done with that, you'll come and do 10 weeks of SWIT with us. We will be in person, hopefully starting in January. So you can expect your training by the time you guys all get hired. I fully anticipate, unless something changes, that we will be in person. They're in the county right now. They are doing a teleworking plan. So once you get to a unit and start getting cases, there will still be the opportunity to telework. You can probably count on being in person most of those 26 weeks. So just for the experience of collaborating with other people in the office and stuff like that. So, and then once you leave SWIT, you will go back out into a WTD unit in the region that you're now assigned to. And continue your foundational training with them. You'll have about a week of shadowing, and then you will likely get your first referral about a week after you leave SWIT. And I say referral because most staff that are assigned to a region out of training are going to front end units right now. So as I mentioned, it's a June hire date for the MSWs and a September hire date for the BSWs. So you can plan on that. You will find out what region you're going to sometime during SWIT. Generally, it's happening right around week 8, but that can fluctuate for all kinds of different reasons. So that is definitely one of the questions we get most often in SWIT. And it's probably one of the hugest anxiety producers. I wish that we had, more ways to help alleviate that anxiety. But when you guys, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But when you come to SWIT, that'll be topic of discussion too, as to why it's not till week 8, why you don't. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons for that. If you're interested, I'm happy to share, but it's generally done about week 8 of SWIT. And then you'll be on probation for a year. There are several things that can extend your probation. So probation starts the day you're hired. The good news is that you're in training for half of your probation, and you're sitting in a classroom for 10 weeks of that. So not that it hasn't happened before, but it's kind of difficult to mess up during 10 weeks of in classroom training. But if you take time off, that often can extend your probation. When you come to the county, we generally really kind of hope that you consider kind of those requests for time off in that first year, because it can extend your probation. Of course, things come up, but just you're in a training mode. You're just getting to know a new job, and just the more time that you can spend kind of learning and growing during that year, the better. Any questions about this slide?
Catherine, there's a question about what WTD means. I think meaning the training unit.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
Yep. So it stands for Workforce Training and Development. So up until about 2 years ago, the training was just 10 weeks of SWIT, and then everybody went to a region and they were trained in region by their supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. Something we had been advocating for years was to actually have training units. And so about 2 years ago, we acquired a training manager who is now over the internship program, SWIT, and the training units. So all of that now is kind of under the umbrella of Workforce Training and Development. But when you hear the WTD units, those are really the training units in region. Every region has one. Every WTD unit has a supervisor and a senior assigned to them. And the number of staff that end up in each unit really is contingent upon how many staff are going to each region. So we have one in each region. We also have one for that kind of as a catch-all for people who go to RFA, EFC, residential, continuing, that they know if they're going to a continuing unit or adoptions. So there's one soup who kind of handles a lot of that continuing training. Also, people who are going to a region and they know they're going to put them in a continuing unit, they may spend less time in their WTD unit, which is heavily front end investigations training. And so there's a few variations that happen, but we're seeing just about everybody go to a WTD unit for at least a couple of weeks to get that foundational investigations training. And like I said, the 3 weeks before SWIT, you will go to one of those WTD units, but it's not necessarily going to be where you're assigned. And then after SWIT, you'll go to the unit that is in the region you're assigned to. So you may do your first 3 weeks in East Region and then be assigned to Central Region. So you'll have the opportunity to work with 2 different WTD soups during that time. And the other thing that I'll say is when you're in WTD, particularly in the beginning, you will always have somebody, like it'll start with you're shadowing people on their investigations, and then you'll get a referral, and usually the senior or maybe the soup will be going out with you on some of your investigations. So there's a whole WTD policy, which I'm not going to go into now, but it's a very graduated kind of caseload increase. And really that's going to be up to the supervisor depending on how people are doing and depending on experience. The goal is to get people to 100% prior to probation ending. And that's really to be able to see how well you're going to be able to handle the job. But one of the great things about WTD has really been to provide that consistency across regions, so that there's a little bit more consistency in the amount of work that people are getting once they go to region. And one other important piece of that is that all the WTD units are under one manager, regardless of what region they're in. So Tara Motley is our manager, and so she oversees all the WTD units. So everybody's getting the same training, everybody's getting the same, graduated caseload. Any other questions? All right, so I know there was a question about how do salaries increase, and here is the salary schedule. So once you pass probation, you will get a step increase, and then you'll get a step increase every year. The glorious thing about the county is once you max out, you really only get the cost of living increase every year. But going into the PSW job, you've got about 6 years to max out. So this information is also on the website. So it's public knowledge. I had a relative, well, actually a friend's relative look it up. They're like, I know how much money you make. I'm like, random. It was at a Christmas party, but it is totally public knowledge. Like you can look up anybody in a public agency and find out how much money they make. No secrets.
So Catherine, you can also change the salary schedule if you promote. So that will give you another option over the years, once you're eligible for a promotion to a different category of recruitment, like.
Yeah, and I know I heard what Kenya said last year, and I meant to kind of follow up on it because I know she said that when you promote, you go back down to step one. In my experience, and I will get a definite on this, you don't necessarily go down to step one. That any promotion, you should always increase by at least 5%. So for instance, if you are at step 3 and you promote to senior, whatever, you'll go to the step of senior that is at least 5% over what you were making as a PSW. Depending on when you promote and how various things work, that can really range anywhere from like a 5% increase to like 1 year. I promoted right after a COLA. And so it was like, I got the COLA and then I promoted. And so my increase actually, when I went from PSW to senior, it was almost 9%. So that was kind of cool. So it just depends. But that's my understanding is that you have to go up at least 5%. So they'll put you at whatever step of senior that's at least 5% over what you were getting at the PSW. All right. So just those of you guys who are interning with us, hopefully you have kind of heard this before, but the job summary for PSW is just investigating and evaluating allegations of abuse and neglect, providing casework services to children and families, assessing for safety and risk. This is probably one of the most important things to remember when you're interviewing. And we make placement decisions and recommendations to the court about reunification and also permanency for children. We attend a lot of meetings, multidisciplinary meetings, case consultations. We're a very integral part in the plans for our families. And then we work closely with law enforcement, juvenile court, and family court. Qualifications for the position, you guys will all meet at some point, a bachelor's degree in social work from a college or university, or a bachelor's degree, and I guess that should be a bachelor's or an MSW, a bachelor's degree from another college or university with 24 units in behavioral sciences and 1 year's work experience. So the reason that the MSWs qualify now is because to be in an MSW program, you have a bachelor's degree, and your internship alone counts toward that that experience. So that's why you guys are able to apply even before you get your master's. So how you access the application. So I really encourage you guys to start, you're not going to be able to access the application until the recruitment starts, but to just go to this site, kind of see where it is and be ready to go so that when the recruitment opens up, you know where to go. You just go, it's san diego county.gov. You'll go to the human resources page and look at current job postings. So once we tell you it's open, we'll likely send you an email that actually has a hyperlink straight to the application. But it's important to know how to get there anyways. So when you go to job postings, you can go on there right now and see the job postings that are available. Just make sure that you don't go to promotional job postings because those are only available to current county employees. But once the PSW position opens up, it will show up in job postings. And you will be able to click on it. So what we really, really recommend you do before the recruitment actually comes out is create an account in governmentjobs.com. That way, when the recruitment comes out, all you have to do is go in and say, I want to use this profile, and it'll populate a lot of what needs to be in there. You're not going to count on that totally. You're still going to go through step by step of the job and make sure everything's filled out correctly, but it'll save you a lot of time once that recruitment comes out, especially if it comes out during finals. You're going to be really happy that you got a lot of the busy work done now. So we really encourage you guys to go to that governmentjobs.com, complete your profile. You'll be able to put in all of your information, your work experience, your education. You'll be able to keep this even once you start with the county. So when you promote, you'll be able to just update some information in there. It's super helpful. I can't tell you how helpful it is to kind of have an account in there and be able to just pull it up and make some adjustments. So when you are filling out your application, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more with the supplemental questions, write down everything that you have done, right? Don't write it in a paragraph, just do dot points, like I've done this, and this. Don't use acronyms, make sure you spell everything out. So the people who are reviewing these applications have limited knowledge of child welfare. They are looking at an answer key and they are checking boxes like, okay, yes, they said they've done this. They've said they've done this. So the more information that you provide, the more check marks they might be able to fill out. Obviously, just do things like spell check, any supporting documentation. The sooner you upload it, the easier it's going to be. If they have to chase you down for some information, that could just delay the processing of your application. So resume, previous transcripts, your current MSW transcripts showing that you're going to be graduating in the fall, all of that stuff you can upload when you're creating the account. And then if you need to make adjustments later, you can make adjustments later. But very, very important piece. Make sure that you indicate that you're Title 40. This does give you priority. Please check that box or say it somewhere in your application. And then same thing with being bilingual.
Catherine, we have a question.
Yes.
It's about supervision. Are there opportunities to get supervised hours? Is that an option now in San Diego County?
That is a great question. The county is currently working on that. So that has actually been a huge kind of topic of conversation. By the time that you guys come in, I'm hopeful that we will have finalized some plans that are being put in place around opportunities for supervision for staff that are coming in. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but I do know that they are working diligently to create that possibility. So historically, we haven't really. People have had to go outside for supervision, but I'm hopeful that that'll all be in place by the time you guys start.
Catherine, even if it is allowed, though, there is something about it can't happen until after training. What was that? Remember that piece? Like even if even if supervision is offered, I don't think you can start until after SWIT.
Yeah, well, you won't be able to start until after SWIT just because you really need to be working with families and clients. And I think that there is you
An
can still
additional
do it
week,
while
huh?
you're in the WTD units. I want to say it might be a month, but I don't know exactly what the criteria is going to be for this internal offer. So most of what we've been working with is people who are going outside for supervision. But it's not, you don't have to, it's not the end of 26 weeks. It's sooner than that 26 weeks.
Thank
But
you.
yes, definitely after SWIT, because you need to be working with
I think it
families.
was SWIT +4. The policy is there, but I think it's SWIT +4 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, I'll text Tara and try to get an answer before this is over. But I do think that going outside for supervision versus this whole new thing that they're doing where they will be able to use county time for supervision, I don't know if the criteria is going to be different for that. So. Okay. Even if you're not a 4E student, okay, that's all right. Any other questions before we kind of go over the supplemental questions? All right. So as part of the application, there are going to be some, in fact, I'm going to move this real quick because I don't want to break my neck.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions coming through.
Okay.
Okay, so does it have to be a resume or a CV? The important piece is that you have all of your information in there and that it matches what you put on your application. So one of the things we've noticed over the years is that students didn't put in their internships in when it says work history. So you do need to make sure you include your internship because that's going to help qualify you for the position. You can list other experiences, especially around customer service is really important. Working, anything you're doing, working with families, with children. Some of you may have worked in daycares or residential care. Those are all really great things to put on your application. Why is the difference of pay so low for MSW? It's the same pay. So one of the things, perhaps in the union, when you're doing contract negotiations, in the future, they'll be able to create MSWs coming in at a higher pay than BSWs. But for now, historically, that's just how they've done this particular recruitment. Let's see. There is also, okay, so there's a question about repeating the big anxiety producers you mentioned earlier.
That one was answered by another student.
Yeah, okay, that one's good. I mean, I think it's really hard to not know where you're going to work and which region, and also whether you're going to be front end, back end. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And I feel like one of the best things to maybe focus on is where the needs are. And that's kind of just how things happen in child welfare. You're really just responding to the needs of the agency, the community where you're placed. You can apply for a transfer when usually it's after probation is when you can usually apply for a transfer. So that's 1 year. And if you think about it, it's really good. When you graduate, you're also just going out into a brand new job and learning the job. And it will be very different than being an intern when you have your own caseload and you're responsible and you're not in that student role anymore. So it's also helpful to really just think about that time as you're really investing in yourself and your professional career for training and developing yourself, which is really hard when you to try to plan a vacation in the middle of your training. It's kind of like when you go to graduate school in the middle of the semester to say, I'm going to take 2 weeks off. And that's not that easy to do, right? As you're learning and training. So that might be a way to kind of conceptualize when you go out and you're in your first job, how to think about that year that you're really investing in yourself to be successul. There's a
I
question.
Yeah, I see something about the resume being 1 or 2 pages. I'll be really transparent. Like your resume is much less important than how you fill out the application at this stage. Your resume will become more important, you know, maybe when they're selecting regions or if you're looking for promotion internal to the county. But really, how you fill out the application, how you complete the supplemental questions, what you list in your work experience, that's really what our analysts are looking at. I honestly don't even know it. They're not going to go looking in a resume to try to check boxes. They are going to go off of what you fill out in the application. So the resume is helpful when you are interviewing or when the managers are looking at who they're going to select for their regions. But in terms of the application, it's less important. So I would say, you know, if I would say 2 pages, depending on how much experience you have. I mean, there's no way in the world I could ever get my resume down to 1 page at this point. But there might, you know, I think 2 pages front and back is fine. But just don't count on anything in your resume being used to score your application.
Catherine, we mentioned about drug screening and THC.
Yeah, I will get a definite answer on that, but I do not think that cannabis is okay at this point.
Especially if you're going to be driving children around, I would imagine.
Exactly. Yep. So if that is something that is in your life, I would encourage you to make sure it doesn't show up on a drug screen. Yeah, so with the overtime, yes, you can choose between comp and cash. The way comp is paid is it ends up being time and a half comp time. So if you work an hour of overtime, you get an hour and a half of comp time. And if you work an hour and a half paid, you get an hour paid or an hour and a half paid but the way it shows up on your paycheck is really weird, but you're basically getting time and a half for that hour. But you do have the option. The policy actually says that the agency can deny cash based on administrative reasons, but right now they're not. So we can pretty much choose. I appreciate that fact, Lisa. All right, are we ready to go into the supplemental questions? Okay. All right, so again, what you fill out in your work experience is really important and definitely include your internship. But it is also very important to make sure that you are answering these supplemental questions honestly, but we're going to talk a little bit about how you can how you qualify to check each box. So obviously, this first question is just about, you know, that you're filling this out accurately. So just one thing I can say is we've had some situations happen where like somebody checks no on this and then it's like brakes hit and the admin analyst is like, what? They don't understand this information. So just be very careful when you're completing this information. So I don't know if you guys have had the chance to, well, I guess you did have the chance to watch the hiring video because I think you watched it before your 4E stuff, but it'll ask you if you've watched that video. Please hopefully watch it before you apply so you can check yes. It'll ask you like what experience or how are you qualifying for this position? So obviously you're going to check the box that pertains to you. If you just are filling it out because you're getting your BSW or you have your BSW, I don't think please nobody check, I do not meet any of the minimum requirements, because that would be tragic. So when you are completing this as an intern in an MSW program, you are filling it out with your bachelor. If you have your bachelor's degree in social work, you're checking that box. If you have it in another field before getting your MSW, you're going to check that box. Okay, so you guys are qualifying in December, whenever the recruitment comes out, based on your bachelor's plus your experience. Okay, so just check the appropriate box based on what kind of bachelor's you have. Check whatever applies to you. Please, please, please check 4E, because again, that's going to give you priority. Bilingual, if you're bilingual, checking that box is going to give you priority. So please check all that apply. So if you have your BSW and in your MSW, check both of those boxes. Again, just remembering that every checkbox is probably tied to a score. Okay.
Excuse me, Catherine.
Yeah.
For the bachelor level students, which box should they choose in number 3? We'll be giving them a letter, but would they do the first one?
Yeah, because they're getting their BSW, right?
Right, so they would do that one, and even though it's not done, that's what's going to qualify them, is that first checkbox
Yes, with the letter.
with the letter, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it'll ask you what type of degree, if you have a degree in psychology or whatever. So again, just a reminder that it's really, really important to upload any documents to provide proof, just to not have your stuff delayed. So hopefully by the time you fill out this application, you've already uploaded that stuff into your governmentjobs.com account. And so you'll be able to just, check those boxes because they're already included. So kind of Amalia, going back to those bachelors, being able to say, I have a letter of completion and will submit my degree as required. So that's probably what they're.
And then Catherine, one reminder for all the MSW students is that you're going to go ahead and download your temporary transcripts. This is something that every year people seem to forget when they're turning in their application. Depending on when the timeline happens, some of you may have already completed the fall semester, and then you can kind of upload those. The HR will ask you for the final transcript, and you'll also be getting a letter from the department when you actually are finalizing your application in June, and when your official transcripts are available. But you won't have those for a while, so HR will accept your temporary transcript showing that you're enrolled in the MSW program and how much coursework you've completed. And most of you have completed, unless you're advanced standing, you'll have had and shown your BSW and then your coursework that's in progress. Unofficial is correct, because you won't have an official transcript until you graduate. So, and note that each school will also provide a letter about your standing in the program and how you're doing as far as in your projected graduation. So those usually you can also upload those with your application if you'd like.
All right. So again, just you're basically saying that, yes, you're going to submit your transcripts. So I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure you're checking the right box. So here is, again, all of this is kind of important. The reason we go through it is people have been uncertain as to how to check these things. Generally, the more boxes you're checking, the better your chances of, getting a score. So this talks about working conditions. This is a job that, as you guys have probably seen for your internship, is a difficult job. So there are some working conditions that, there's maybe some people out there that would struggle with, agreeing to some of this stuff, but it is the job that we're signed up for. So So it's really important that you are not picking and choosing, just because you say you don't want to work with diverse clients doesn't mean that you're going to get a job and then work with work with people who are nice and kind and, look like you. So basically you should probably be checking off just about all of these. So it's just every checkbox that I'm not going to tell you you have to check something, but I'm just saying that the more you check, the better. So willing to interact with diverse clients who are upset or hostile. You will probably see that in this job. Experiencing some sort of mental health issues, child abuse or neglect, domestic violence or substance abuse. That you're willing to monitor and transport children of all ages who have been exposed to abuse and neglect, willing to perform the duties in the field and drive to remote areas with and outside of the county of San Diego. Now, I will say that you may work at this job and never have to drive to a remote region, or you may come to this job and get placed in East County where you're driving to rural East County every day. It just depends. And so that's just, kind of a disclaimer. So what must be able to work in person, in the field, clients' homes, treatment centers, hospitals, schools. Again, like I said, training is going to be in person. Physically able and willing to lift and carry small children ranging from age 1 to 7 who weigh up to 50 pounds. So this may come up in the medical as well. I don't think they ask you to lift 50 pounds, but just, and if you check, I'm not willing to perform any of the stated working conditions, that's probably going to get your application in the round bin to the left of the analyst desk. Just an FYI. They are going to ask you if you have a passport. Again, I know very few people other than people who work for the International Liaisons Office and stuff who, or maybe more in South, have gone across the border, but they want to know if that's something that you have. It doesn't mean that you have to have a current passport, but check whichever box applies, but just know, and this is, I would say that you're willing to obtain one, and you might not have to get one until the time comes up, but just, the more willing you are. Same thing with the driver's license. I believe all of you guys have to have a current driver's license in order to be interns, so that should be a yes. But if not, you must be willing to obtain one. The other thing that I will say is that even once you get the job, and this is true for internship as well, the county has a lot of capabilities to find out what is going on in your driver's license and automobile life. We get what are called wrap backs. So even if you don't have a DUI when you get the job, if you get one, the county's going to know about it. We will hear if you don't update your registration. We will hear about it if you don't update your insurance. There's an expectation that you not only have a driver's license, but you keep it current and you keep it on file, and the county's got a direct line to the DMV if anything changes with that driver's license. So just something to be aware of. And that's true of kind of the criminal background stuff as well. So when they do all of those checks, when you're employed by this agency, the county is notified, if you commit a crime and all that good stuff. So briefly describe your experience working in a family or children's services agency performing duties of supervision, treatment, or protective services to children. Any experience and or internships indicated in your response must also be described in detail on the work history experience section of your employment application. Internships must be verifiable on transcripts. If you do not have this experience, indicate NA. Nobody should be writing NA. This is where you do the same thing that you do for your work history, and maybe even itemizing the tasks that you've done before. I believe a lot of you guys, several of you guys will have 2 years in the county. So there's a lot of county things that you've probably done. If you have supervised a visit once, You can write that I've, in your supervised visits. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it for the whole year of your internship. It's an experience that you've had. If you interned in a school, if you interned at a community-based organization, if you interned in a treatment facility, if you interned in a hospital, think about how all of that experience applies to this job and write it down. If you worked in the behavioral health center, you had experience working with clients diagnosed with various behavioral health problems, that you performed crisis intervention, like write it all down. The more it's not a problem if you write too much. Let the analyst sort through all of the information. Now, don't write stuff that you didn't do. It's really important that you are honest, but we always say, don't assume that because you say I worked in a treatment facility that the admin analyst is going to know what that means. You want to itemize all the things that you did. And I would do bullet points here too. And it's going to feel redundant because everything that you just said in question 13 is probably going to come up in question 14. But again, this is really important that you're checking anything that you have done. So I would assume that all of you have in some way, shape, or form investigated child abuse and neglect allegations. Now, you weren't primary on any of those investigations, but you have worked with a worker, you shadowed a worker, you have participated in the investigations. Communicated verbally and written with all parties related to or involved in the treatment and services to children and youth declared to juvenile dependents. If you have done anything on any continuing services case, if you've been part of filing a petition, been part of any court reports, worked with any children at Polinsky, worked with any children who are in any of the continuing services units, and pretty much everybody's probably had at least one experience in this area. Conducted home assessments of relative and non-relative homes. So those of you guys who have worked in RFA or something like that, it probably is easy to answer this question. But if you've been out with a worker who's evaluating a relative, even if they're not working for RFA, if you've participated in all of talking to, a caregiver or a relative, you are evaluating that home, right? You are looking around to make sure that that child is still in a safe environment. So check the box. Conducted permanency and long-term planning for the well-being of children. Again, even if you're in the front end, you're talking about, if this child can't be kept safe in home, let's talk about, what our options are to keep this child safe. And part of that conversation should be, how do we get permanency for this child as soon as possible, particularly if we're not keeping them in the house today. Facilitate a family reunification with children, youth, and parents. Again, pretty much all of this work is, if you've worked with anybody who's been removed, you're facilitating reunification. Creating jointly developed, understandable, achievable, and behavioral-based needs and services plans. Like this can include safety plans, monitor the behavior of well-being of children placed in resource family. So again, any continuing services, Polinsky, residential, anybody who's placed out of home that you've even shadowed a worker on a visit to. Provided written and verbal communication with supervisor. Everybody's typed up a contact, right? So check the box. Supervised visits between parents and children. Transported children and youth to appointments, therapy sessions, doctor visits, court hearings. Now I know that interns are being used for transport, so I think everybody's going to be able to check that box. If you've been to any CFT, you've been a member of a treatment placement team, worked in a child protection 24-hour emergency shelter. If you have spent a day shadowing at Polinsky, you can check that box. Worked in a group home, and then some of these you might be able to check because you've done it in other jobs as well. So you don't have to just think about your internship. Children, youth, and families with child protective services allegations. Yes.
I just wanted to add this super quickly.
Sure.
Y'all don't have to have done any of these 1,000 times. One time is enough. You won't feel that way when you're filling out the application, but let's say that you have supervised one visit. The question is what? Supervised visits between parents and children. Okay, if you've only done it once, I would struggle on that question, but if you've done it only twice, you're super solid. All the other ones, if you've done it one time, you in good conscience can check that box. So I don't want you to think that you have to have done it 100 times, that you have to be an expert, you have to know it up one side and down another. Not true. I just wanted to say that, Catherine.
Okay, yeah, no, that's important because, and I would also say, like, when you're filling this out, when in doubt about whether or not you can check it, like, reach out to somebody to ask, because I'd rather you know, kind of ask and get that point if you can, than be like, oh, I don't think I can. Like, really, yeah, if you've even watched something like this happen once, you can check it. Participate in CFTs. Yeah, no, just nobody check. I have not performed any of the tasks. So if you were to fill this out today, even without the rest of your internship, you could probably check a lot of those boxes. So same thing, kind of, this is just who you've worked with. So law enforcement, substance abuse treatment providers. And so this is like, this pertains a little bit more specifically to your internship, but again, if you have worked with a worker and you've been shadowing a worker and they had a conversation with law enforcement because they followed up on a police report or a cross report or something like that, it doesn't mean that you had to like sit in an office and go to the police station and talk to law enforcement. Like, if you've been to a forensic interview, chances are law enforcement was there. So thinking about, you know, where are all the options and opportunities that you had to interact. It could be a phone call, it could be in person, whatever. So substance abuse treatment providers, I would say probably 80+% of our parents are involved with substance use, just based on statistics. So chances are you've had reason to interact with these providers. Schools, medical providers, behavioral health providers, probation. Now this is specifically juvenile probation. Legal and judicial system professionals may kind of fall under, you know, if you've had an adult with a probation officer, you know, you should all be checking other, just because. Community organization, service corps, you know, I think everybody should probably be able to check all of these boxes by the end of your internship. So if you said other, some of the other may fall under, let me think about that. I guess community-based organizations might be kind of like, there's a lot of work going on with like diversity and inclusion right now. We're working on a lot of trainings and stuff. So, you know, if you've worked with the specific, like, I don't remember I think it's the International Rescue Organization. So they work with a lot of refugees and stuff like that, but that's something that you may want to list specifically under other. And so if there's, you know, if you've had a unique experience on a case and you worked with, like, for instance, if you've worked with Dept across the border, so that may fall under other. So kind of these other child welfare organizations in other countries, that's something that you might choose for other. So. Do you have experience writing independently under supervision? And again, so anything that you've even participated in. Assessment reports, contact notes, definitely you should be checking that. I know a lot of you guys are in front end, or at least have had an opportunity to shadow front end. So Even if you've just written part of those investigative narratives, like maybe they had you write a section, you can include that. Adoptions home studies is probably going to be a little bit more specific to the people who are in adoptions, but case plans, case notes. So again, if you've written any part of this stuff, maybe your intern, your field instructor had you kind of help write a court report, and or maybe they, had you type up a contact note, even if it, and they just wanted to review it, you still wrote it, even if it didn't go on CWS CMS. By second semester, all of you guys should be doing a lot of this stuff on your own, but just be thinking about the opportunities that you've had. All right. So how did you hear about this? Probably everybody, I mean, you might have heard about it before you came to college, but you can choose the appropriate one. And that's it. Any questions about that? Okay, I'm seeing the chat here. Hold on.
I think there's a lot of questions, just like, how do I categorize certain things I've done? I would just recommend you kind of step back a minute and just really focus on key terms, right? Case management, mental health, referrals, resources. There may be some things that you specifically haven't done, family reunification, because you haven't specifically worked at child welfare. But there might be other areas that you've done different types of things, and your application may have stronger points. You also going to qualify due to the fact that you have an MSW. So those are just points to remember. And some of you may not have as many. We realize there's been a pandemic. There may not be as strong of experiences as people who have not had to deal with a year of pandemic. But I would just really focus on, there's a lot of things that you probably are doing. One thing we really recognize over the years is that students don't give themselves credit for everything they have done. And we're constantly, and Lisa's shaking her head because she'll look at resumes and be like, you're missing like half of the things you did. So really, one thing you can always do is with your field supervisor is sit down and really just talk about what types of things I have done in my internship and what am I missing or what can I still do. And then those will be really things you've got time before the application comes out. Everything that's a lot of things listed on here, there also should correspond to your, there's a list that the supervisors should have. And if they don't, let us know, that talks about where you should be at during certain points in your internship. Those types of experiences that are on the expectations for interns also kind of correlate to this particular document. And we don't expect, once again, as a reminder, that you've done everything. You're a student intern, but we do want you to get credit for what you have done and practiced in the field. And we want to give you want to give yourself credit. So sometimes people word it very literal. And there's that piece when you, like Lynn was talking about earlier, where you've had exposure, you know what it's about, you might have been a person shadowing the experience. Those are things you can still give yourself credit for.
Absolutely. And I highly encourage, particularly when, I know somebody had asked if the supplemental questions can be shared. At this point, I don't feel comfortable sharing them. But as Lorraine said, this is tape, so you can go back through. But I will find out, and if we can, share these at this point, so you guys can go over it with your field instructor now, because just knowing that when the application comes out, you might be on break or something like that. I'll find out about that, and if we can share it, I will. I'll share it with the schools, that they can then share it with you. But I do, encourage you to, sit down with your field instructor and say, like, can we talk about the things that we've done? And it's a good opportunity to say, like, I'd like an experience in this area, can we talk about creating that? So that can be part of the conversation as well.
Yes, I think it's also important to remember that there's a point system that's being kind of taken from this list. And I had 2 students that didn't score high enough, and they just, not in this check off, but in the list of what they've done, they were just, they didn't maximize their internship experiences, and it cost them points. So definitely I like the suggestion of sitting with your field instructor and kind of just making a list. It doesn't, just bullets. And again, it doesn't have to be that you're an expert at it. You saw it, you did it, you shadowed it, you participated in it.
And that's
I just
another
wanted to
reason
point
that
out, yeah.
I really encourage you guys to go onto that government jobs website and create your profile now, because you might not think of everything the first time you go in, but if you go in every now and then, or maybe you're creating a profile and you sit with your field instructor and you're kind of creating it. And then when the application time comes up, maybe there's something that you can add to that list under work experience. I don't be like what I've probably done more than one time in my career, where you wait till the last minute to fill out an application, and then there's this pressure to come up with everything that you've ever done. Start creating a list now, so that when you sit down with the application, you've already thought through everything, right? And that maybe 1 or 2 things kind of gets added when you go, oh yeah, I missed that. Give yourself a couple of shots to remember stuff.
And there's some good points in the chat. Both schools, we've really been working on your Title IV competency portfolios and your you can look back at, if you're an advanced year, you can look back last year and really just use those, because the whole point was that you were already documenting what you've been doing. And so if you need a refresher, you can look back and see how much you've really done. And then this year, if you're not keeping track, it's a kind of this time to light a fire to remind you, just let's get with it. Because you have potentially 1 to 2 months to really start organizing yourself of everything you've done. And it really is a great conversation you should be having. We're nearing the end of the semester to see what you've accomplished, what you haven't accomplished, what your goals are for next semester. So those are just good reminders for yourself right now. And you may have done some of this work already. You just need to look and see where you might have put it. I know we always encourage students to make lists of the different experiences they've had. So you just have a notebook that you can keep writing down, because technically, even as you move into the county, these are things you can still draw on that you've done. So those are just great things that you're not reinventing. And I'm just going to still plug to create your account and get started, just so you're breaking it down into pieces. And so that we're not getting, we can't help everyone when there's a frantic call and the application's due in 24 hours at 5 o'clock. And one thing I don't know if Catherine pointed out, but if it's due at 5 p.m. on Friday, we always recommend that you upload it earlier, because there could be, as you all know, we have technical issues. Maybe your Wi-Fi is out or whatever you need to do. Just make sure you don't plan to submit it at 4:59, because this is another thing with the county. It's a government agency. They don't accept things past the time of whatever was allocated. So you can't turn your application in at 5:01 if it was due at 5 o'clock. And that's the piece where you would miss the opportunity to apply on this recruitment, and you would have to wait until the next one. So there's just certain things that are flexible and some things that aren't. Okay, and let's see, is there any other questions that we can answer? And one other point about the supplemental questions, they're likely not to change, but one of the reasons is because the recruitment is not out yet. They could make changes or adjustments to that recruitment. So this is all based on what we've known from the past, what we've experienced, but they could make a decision to change. So it's just important. We know you're still going to be asked to qualify for the position, but there may be slight changes, which over the years they have made. Ideally, they've been to clarify and make it more inclusive, which is things we've worked on to help you answer them better. But just as a note, it's really just a starting point when you're creating your application and your process right now.
All right, so lastly, I was talking with Lorene and don't worry that once you get the application in and everybody's getting ready for interviews, we will all reconvene and talk about that. But just to kind of give you a sneak peek, I talked a little bit about the interview process, that there will be 2 people. There are 5 questions at this point. 4 of them will be questions that you see and respond to verbally, and they've actually added a writing sample. Don't worry, it has nothing to do with the answer to the question. It's much more about how you write. So it'll be some sort of benign question about, what brought you to this field, or what makes you want to be a social worker, or why did you choose the profession of social work? Something that is maybe more personal, and they just want to see how you write. So don't worry about that. But the other 4 questions, this is also a really good thing, as you get closer to the interview and stuff. And some field instructors have been really good about this. But you definitely are going to want to be talking with your field instructors. Again, we will, look at doing some workshops and stuff like that to help prepare you. But the most important, like the 4 questions will, there's always an experience education. And the one thing I say about this is, you don't want to spend a lot of time on this question. So this is something you can be thinking about now. You're filling out the application and be thinking about like, what's your 5-minute spiel about your experience in education, right? So that you can get through that question and have more time to spend on the other questions. But they'll talk to you about risk factors for abuse and neglect. There will be a question about like, how do you resolve conflict? And then a critical thinking question that'll get a little bit more specifically into like, what are the steps of the referral? What are you thinking about when you're going out on the referral? That kind of stuff. So, but again, don't worry too much about the interview right now. We'll definitely come back around and prepare you guys a little bit better for that. And that's it.